December 9th, 2025, 4:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Highland Park, Dallas, Texas. A column of 17 unmarked black Suburbans turns off Mockingbird Lane and slides into the curving driveway of a 14,000 square foot Georgian estate. Headlights extinguished, tires hissing on wet brick. 42 agents in Navy windbreakers step out without slamming doors. FBI Counterintelligence Division, NSA, CSA, a small DOJ National Security Division observer team in civilian clothes. They form 3 concentric rings around the property in under 90 seconds. Special Agent Vincent Costigan, 51, 23 years in counterintelligence, walks to the front door carrying a sealed search warrant and a Faraday bag the size of a pillowcase. He does not knock. The breaching team places a hydraulic ram against the oak. At 4:31 a.m. exactly, in coordination with 5 identical operations across 3 states, the ram drives forward. Inside the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, Brigham Albright, 52, founder and chief executive of Sentinel Networks, sits up in bed at the sound of splintering wood and reaches for a cell phone that has, unknown to him, been remotely bricked 19 minutes earlier by a National Security Agency unit operating from Fort Meade. He will never make another phone call as a free man. Across the country, in Reston, Virginia, in Palo Alto, California, in 5 separate Dallas suburbs, identical scenes unfold. 28 indictees, 6 corporate facilities, 20 homes. The largest coordinated counterintelligence raid against a domestic telecommunications contractor in the history of the United States. By 4:47 a.m., every primary target is in custody. By 5:15 a.m., the first of 47,000 5G base stations across American critical infrastructure begin receiving an emergency firmware rollback signal, pushed simultaneously by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. By dawn, the world will learn that for 4 years, a contractor trusted with the digital nervous system of the United States had been quietly selling its access to 2 foreign intelligence services for $8.5 billion in cryptocurrency. The code name of the operation that brought them down was Steel Halcyon, and it began, as so many of these stories do, with one engineer who refused to look away from a pattern that did not make sense. In the next 20 minutes, you will see how a single curious senior engineer at a Long Beach Verizon facility cracked open a 4-year espionage operation buried inside the firmware of 47,000 cell towers. You will sit inside the FBI counterintelligence war room as agents map a conspiracy that reaches from Dallas boardrooms to Talon safe houses, and you will walk through the December raid that ended it all. OCT1. Discovery. The story does not begin in a federal building. It begins on a Tuesday afternoon in May 2024 in a windowless network operations center on Pier J of the Port of Long Beach, California, where a 39-year-old senior network security engineer named Carmen Diaz is eating a cold turkey sandwich at her desk and watching a packet capture scroll past on her left monitor. Diaz has been with Verizon Business Wireless for 11 years. Before that, she spent 6 years in the United States Marine Corps, doing signals work at 29 Palms. She is the kind of engineer who keeps a paper notebook on her desk and writes down every anomaly she has ever seen, even the ones that turned out to be nothing. On this particular Tuesday, her packet capture shows something that should not exist. One of the new 5G core routers at the port, a Sentinel Networks SR9400 series base station controller installed 18 months earlier as part of a federal infrastructure modernization contract, is sending a 4 kilobyte UDP packet to an IP address she does not recognize every 14 minutes. Exactly. Diaz writes down the timestamp. She writes down the destination IP. She runs the IP through 3 different geolocation services and gets the same answer each time. Talon, Estonia, a small hosting provider she has never heard of. She checks her firewall rules. The traffic is not blocked. She checks the device's documented telemetry whitelist provided by Sentinel. The Estonian IP is not on it. She checks the device's signed configuration manifest. Everything matches the factory specification down to the last byte. According to every document Verizon possesses, this router is doing nothing wrong. According to her packet capture, it is shipping 4 kilobytes of encrypted data to a server in Eastern Europe every 14 minutes and has been doing so since the day it was installed. Carmen Diaz does not panic. She also does not file a casual ticket. Instead, she does what 11 years and a Marine Corps background have trained her to do. She gathers evidence quietly. Over the next 3 weeks, she pulls archived packet captures from 12 other Sentinel SR 9400 controllers across the Southern California region. Every single one is doing exactly the same thing, 4 kilobytes. Every 14 minutes. Different destination IPs, scattered across hosting providers in Estonia, Cyprus, and a small data center in Almaty, Kazakhstan. The packets are encrypted. She cannot read them, but the pattern is unmistakable. On June 4th, 2024, Diaz brings her notebook to a small conference room in El Segundo and lays it open in front of her boss, a director of network security named Theodore Ramsey. Ramsey listens for 40 minutes without interrupting. Then he picks up the secure line on his desk and calls a man he knows at the FBI Los Angeles field office. By nightfall, 2 special agents are sitting in Diaz's apartment in San Pedro, drinking the bad coffee from her single-serve machine and asking her to walk them through her notebook one more time, slowly. The senior of the 2 agents writes down a phrase in his own notebook that will, 8 days later, appear in a formal teletype to FBI headquarters in Washington. The phrase is, "Source appears credible, technically rigorous, motivated by duty, no apparent grievance." That teletype lands on the desk of Special Agent Vincent Costigan at the FBI Counterintelligence Division on the morning of June 13, 2024. Costigan reads it twice. He then walks 2 floors down and across a secure corridor to a windowless office, where he asks the duty officer to put him on the calendar for an interagency briefing with the National Security Agency's Tailored Access Operations Division and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Within 72 hours, 3 people are sitting in a SICK in Fort Meade, Maryland, looking at copies of Carmen Diaz's packet captures projected on a wall-mounted screen. Costigan, Commander Yara Bekabuk of NSA Tailored Access Operations, a 44-year-old former Air Force cryptographic officer with a doctorate from Johns Hopkins in applied mathematics, and Dr. Nathaniel Worth Holland, 58, Director of Operations at CISA, a man who built his career hunting nation-state intrusions inside American power grids. They look at the same numbers for a long time. Nobody speaks. Then Bekabuk leans forward and says one sentence that will define the next 19 months of all of their lives. Those are not telemetry packets. Those are beacons. And whoever owns the listening end owns the network. ACT2. Conspiracy map. Sentinel Networks was founded in 2014 in a converted warehouse in the Deep Ellum neighborhood of Dallas, Texas, by a 38-year-old former Lockheed Martin systems engineer named Brigham Albright. The company's pitch was simple and for a time deeply impressive. Sentinel would design and manufacture domestic 5G base station hardware that competed directly with foreign vendors, eliminating the supply chain risk that had haunted American telecommunications policy for a decade. Albright was articulate, photogenic, a Naval Academy graduate, and a fluent speaker of the language of national security. By 2017, Sentinel had secured its first federal contract, a small pilot program with the Department of Defense to install hardened cellular infrastructure at 3 military installations in the Southwest. By 2019, the contract portfolio had grown to include base stations at federal courthouses, a Coast Guard communications corridor along the Gulf, and the cellular backbone of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. By 2021, Sentinel was building infrastructure for 16 federal agencies and 11 of the largest port authorities in the country. The cumulative deployment, by the time Carmen Diaz noticed the beacons, was 47,000 active base stations across nearly every category of American critical infrastructure. What the federal contracting officers did not know, and what Albright had personally engineered from the beginning, was that every single one of those base stations shipped with an undocumented secondary firmware partition. The partition was invisible to the standard inspection toolchain. It survived factory resets. It survived firmware updates pushed by Sentinel's own legitimate channel. It was signed with a separate cryptographic key that existed on exactly 2 air-gapped laptops, one in Albright's home office in Highland Park and one in a safe deposit box in Zurich, and it was capable of 3 specific operations. First, live geolocation tracking of any cellular device within the base station's coverage radius, indexed by phone number and SIM identifier. Second, signals interception of any unencrypted SMS message or call metadata passing through the cell sector. Third, on command, the surgical disabling of specific cell sectors for arbitrary durations, invisible to network operations centers, which would simply log the outage as a transient hardware fault. This capability was not a theoretical risk. According to the indictment later unsealed in the Northern District of Texas, the backdoor was operationally invoked at least 1,462 distinct times between 21 and 2025. The buyers were 2 foreign intelligence services. One is identified in the indictment only as Foreign Power One, described as a hostile state actor whose intelligence service operates under the formal authority of its National Security Council. The second, Foreign Power 2, is described as a regional intelligence service that, while not formally hostile to the United States, has been documented brokering access to American infrastructure data to third parties. The total revenue from the sale of access, paid into a layered web of cryptocurrency wallets, mixers, and shell entities registered in 7 jurisdictions, was $8.5 billion over 4 years. The architecture of the conspiracy required more than one man. Albright was the keeper of the signing key and the architect of the financial flow. But the technical implementation required an inner ring of trusted engineers willing to build and maintain a covert second firmware tree alongside the legitimate one. At the center of that inner ring was Dr. Vienna Westrom, 46, Sentinel's chief technology officer and a former assistant professor of computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon. Westrom personally designed the cryptographic envelope that hid the beacon traffic from standard inspection. Below her sat Dr. Suraj Patel Vance, 41, head of firmware engineering, who maintained the covert build pipeline and the secondary code repository, hosted not on Sentinel's corporate infrastructure but on a small private server farm in a leased basement in Plano. Below Patel Vance sat 16 senior firmware engineers who, over the course of 4 years, were quietly read into the project one at a time. Each one offered a personal compensation package that ranged from $1.5 to $4 million in cash bonuses paid through offshore entities in exchange for a signed non-disclosure agreement that bound them to a fictitious classified Department of Defense black program. This last detail is, in the assessment of investigators, the single cleverest element of the entire scheme. The engineers were not told they were committing espionage. They were told that the secondary firmware was an authorized national security capability, that their work was compartmented at a level above their nominal Department of Defense clearances, and that the unusual compensation structure existed because the program could not be acknowledged on standard government payroll. Several of the engineers later told investigators in proffer interviews that they had spent years believing they were quietly serving their country. The illusion was maintained through forged briefing documents, fake polygraph exams administered by a private contractor in a Sentinel facility in Frisco, and elaborate operational security theater that included annual mandatory secure reading rooms and quarterly briefings from a man in a dark suit who claimed to be from the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was not. He was a former British military intelligence officer named Reginald Crane, hired by Albright at $500,000 a year to play the role. What changed in the summer of 2024 was the realization, inside the FBI counterintelligence war room on the 7th floor of the J. Edgar Hoover building, that the geolocation data flowing out of those base stations was not random, it was targeted, and the targets were terrifying. ACT-3, Investigative Wall. By August 2024, Special Agent Vincent Costigan had assembled a dedicated task force of 41 investigators across 3 agencies. They occupied a single secured floor of an unmarked annex building 2 blocks from the Hoover building, behind a door labeled only with a room number. Inside, 3 walls were covered in butcher paper, printed photographs, and red yarn. The yarn formed a map. At the center of the map was Brigham Albright. Radiating outward were the inner ring of conspirators. Radiating outward from them were the 47,000 base stations, marked by category, financial corridors in Lower Manhattan and Chicago, military installations from Camp Pendleton to Fort Liberty, port facilities at Long Beach, Houston, Charleston, and Newark, energy infrastructure including the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and 3 nuclear power plants, federal courthouses in 73 judicial districts. The breakthrough that allowed the team to map the buyer side of the conspiracy came from Commander Beckabook's NSA contingent. By correlating the encrypted beacon timing across multiple base stations, NSA cryptographers were able to identify 2 distinct command and control infrastructures behind the beacons. The first, traced through 12 relay hops, terminated at a server cluster operated by what NSA assessed with high confidence to be the signals intelligence arm of Foreign Power 1. The second terminated at a small office in a nondescript industrial park outside a European capital, occupied by what was nominally a commercial cybersecurity research firm, but was in fact a front entity for Foreign Power 2's Foreign Liaison Service. The geolocation logs recovered from a covert intercept program, the details of which remain classified, painted a picture that made several senior FBI officials physically ill. Between January 2022 and June 2024, the Sentinel backdoors had been used to track the cellular devices of 3 sitting United States senators, 11 federal judges, 2 Joint Chiefs Principals, the senior leadership of 2 presidential campaigns, and at least 46 undercover federal officers operating in counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism, and counterintelligence assignments. In 4 documented cases, the disabling capability had been invoked to create a brief, surgical cellular blackout in a specific geographic area at a specific time. 3 of those 4 blackouts correlated within minutes with the disappearance, assault, or attempted assassination of a foreign dissident living in the United States under federal protection. One of those dissidents did not survive. It was at the briefing where this last fact was presented on the morning of September 22, 2024, in a SciF on the 7th floor of the Hoover building, that the director of the FBI personally authorized the upgrade of the investigation from standard counterintelligence status to a full-spectrum coordinated operation under the cryptonym Steele Halcyon. The Attorney General of the United States signed off on the operational predicate the same afternoon. From that moment, the investigation had a clock attached to it. Costigan, Beckabook, and Worth Holland were given 14 months to develop the case to the point of indictment, identify every conspirator with admissible evidence, and prepare a coordinated takedown that would seize the infrastructure, the personnel, the cryptographic signing keys, and the financial flows simultaneously. Any failure to act on any one of those 4 pillars would allow the conspiracy to survive, mutate, and possibly continue under different leadership. The team had until December 2025. Breakthrough. The case turned on a single human being. His name was Marcus Brennan Hayes, 34, a senior firmware engineer at Sentinel who had been read into the covert program in March 2022. Brennan Hayes was a 2014 graduate of Georgia Tech, a former competitive collegiate cyclist, and the father of a 2-year-old daughter. In the late autumn of 2024, his wife was diagnosed with an aggressive form of ovarian cancer. The treatment protocol her oncologist recommended was experimental and not covered by insurance. The estimated out-of-pocket cost was $400,000. Brennan Hayes, despite his Sentinel compensation, did not have $400,000 in liquid assets. His covert bonuses, paid through an offshore vehicle, could not be transferred to a Texas hospital without triggering questions he had been explicitly warned never to invite. On the night of November 14, 2024, Marcus Brennan Hayes drove to a small public library in Garland, Texas, used a guest computer to access a federal whistleblower portal, and typed 17 sentences describing what he had been doing for the previous 32 months. He provided his real name. He provided his employee number. He provided the file path on a specific server in the Plano basement where the secondary firmware build artifacts were stored. He provided the name Brigham Albright, and he asked, in the 17th sentence, whether there was any program of any kind that could provide his wife with the medical care she needed in exchange for the truth. The message was routed through the Department of Justice within 90 minutes and landed in Vincent Costigan's secure inbox at 6:14 a.m. the following morning. Costigan read it standing up. He read it 3 times. Then he picked up his secure phone and called the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Texas. Within 48 hours, Marcus Brennan Hayes was sitting in a federal safe house in Plano with his wife and daughter, eating takeout from a barbecue place down the street, while a team of FBI agents and Department of Justice prosecutors explained to him in plain language what cooperation would look like and what it would mean. His wife's medical care would be covered through a federal witness protection medical provision. His own legal exposure, while significant, would be addressed through a cooperation agreement that, contingent on truthful and complete testimony, would result in a recommendation of probation rather than incarceration. In exchange, he would wear a wire for the next 11 months. He would continue going to work at Sentinel every morning. He would continue contributing code to the covert firmware repository, and he would, with the assistance of NSA technical personnel, slowly and carefully begin extracting the complete operational architecture of the conspiracy from the inside. Brennan Hayes accepted. Over the next 11 months, he provided investigators with the cryptographic signing keys for the covert firmware partition, the network topology of the Plano basement build infrastructure, the personal identities of every engineer read into the program, recordings of 3 separate operational planning meetings with Dr. Westrom and Dr. Patel Vance, and ultimately, in October 2025, a recording of Brigham Albright himself describing in casual conversation the structure of the cryptocurrency settlement layer through which Foreign Power 1 paid for tracking access. By the end of October 2025, Vincent Costigan had everything he needed. If you have made it this far, hit the like button. It tells YouTube this kind of long-form federal reconstruction is worth recommending to other people who care about how these cases actually get built. It costs you nothing and it helps us keep making them. Now back to the raid. Dat64, The Raid, December 9th, 2025, 4:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. The operation that the task force had been building toward for 19 months unfolds across 6 states in a single coordinated window of 14 minutes. In Highland Park, Special Agent Vincent Costigan walks into Brigham Albright's bedroom and arrests him personally. Albright is wearing pajamas. He does not resist. He asks, in a tone that investigators later described as eerily calm, whether his attorney has been notified. Costigan tells him that his attorney will be notified after the federal magistrate has been notified, which will be after he has been transported to the FBI Dallas field office, which will be after the search team has completed its initial sweep of the property. Albright nods. He sits down on the edge of his bed and waits to be told to stand. In Reston, Virginia, a separate FBI team arrests Dr. Vienna Westrom at her townhouse 3 blocks from the Reston Town Center. Westrom is awake when the agents arrive, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and a laptop open in front of her. The laptop screen displays an encrypted messaging client. According to the agents who entered the residence, Westrom looked up, closed the laptop calmly, and said only, "Took you long enough. She is taken into custody without incident. The laptop is bagged for forensic examination." It will later prove to contain the complete operational logbook of the covert program maintained by Westrom herself in meticulous detail across 4 years. In Palo Alto, a third team arrests Dr. Suraj Patel Vance at the home of his elderly mother, where he has been spending the winter holidays. The arrest is the most difficult of the morning. Patel Vance, who has been told nothing by Albright about any operational risk, has been genuinely unaware that he is the target of an active federal investigation. When the agents identify themselves, he becomes physically ill on the front lawn. He is treated by an FBI medic on scene and transported to a federal holding facility in San Jose. Across the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, across the suburbs of Northern Virginia, across the Bay Area, 16 senior engineers are arrested in their homes. 5 Sentinel sales executives, who manage the corporate-facing relationships with federal contracting officers and provided the legitimate cover for the company's operations, are arrested in the same window. 4 foreign liaison contractors, including the British impersonator Reginald Crane, are arrested at their residences in Highland Park, University Park, and a leased estate in Westlake. Crane attempts to flee out a side door of his home and is detained in the driveway by 2 agents. While the personnel takedowns proceed, 3 parallel operations are underway. First, an FBI evidence response team at Sentinel's corporate headquarters in downtown Dallas seizes the entire corporate server infrastructure under a court-authorized warrant. Second, a CISA technical team, working from a coordinated command center in Arlington, pushes an emergency firmware rollback signal to all 47,000 deployed base stations. The signal, which had been quietly developed and tested over the previous 4 months in coordination with each affected federal agency and commercial carrier, replaces the active firmware with a clean baseline derived from independently audited source code. By 6:30 a.m. Eastern, the rollback is complete on 96% of the deployed fleet. The remaining 4%, located in geographically remote or temporarily unreachable installations, are taken offline pending physical inspection. Third, Treasury and DOJ National Security Division, acting on warrants obtained in 5 foreign jurisdictions, begin the seizure of the cryptocurrency wallets, mixers and shell entities through which Albright had laundered the $8.5 billion payment stream. By the end of the week, approximately $6.1 billion in cryptocurrency assets will be frozen or seized. Microfinal. By 9 a.m. Central, the press release prepared by the Department of Justice National Security Division goes live. 28 indictees, 47,000 compromised base stations, $8.5 billion in foreign payments. The single largest counterintelligence enforcement action against a domestic critical infrastructure contractor in the history of the United States. ACT 5. Aftermath. The trial of United States versus Albright et al. Begins in the Northern District of Texas in March 2026. It will take 14 months. By the time it ends, Brigham Albright will be sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms in federal prison for conspiracy to commit espionage, conspiracy against the United States, and a constellation of related charges. Dr. Vienna Westrom will receive 85 years. Dr. Suraj Patel Vance, who cooperates extensively after his arrest, will receive 32 years. The 16 senior engineers will receive sentences ranging from 12 to 28 years, with reductions for the several who accepted cooperation agreements. The 5 sales executives will receive sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. The 4 foreign liaison contractors will receive 20 to 40 years. Reginald Crane will die of a heart attack in federal custody in his 18th month of incarceration. Marcus Brennan Hayes will be sentenced to 4 years of supervised probation with no incarceration. His cooperation will be sealed in the public record, but referenced in the sentencing memorandum as having been, in the words of the presiding judge, indispensable to the protection of the national security of the United States. His wife will complete her experimental treatment protocol in the summer of 2026 and enter sustained remission. They will relocate, under a federally supported identity adjustment program to a small town in the Pacific Northwest. Brennan Hayes will eventually find work as a network engineer at a regional utility. He will never speak publicly about what he did. Carmen Diaz, the Verizon senior engineer whose paper notebook started everything, will receive a private commendation from the director of the FBI in a ceremony at the J. Edgar Hoover Building in April 2026. She will decline the press attention that her employer briefly attempts to arrange. She will return to Long Beach and continue eating cold turkey sandwiches at her desk and watching packet captures scroll past on her left monitor. She will continue writing down every anomaly she has ever seen, even the ones that turn out to be nothing. The 47,000 base stations will remain in service, now running clean firmware, for the remainder of their operational life cycle. The Department of Defense, working with CISA, will impose a new framework for the independent cryptographic auditing of all firmware deployed on federal critical infrastructure, a framework that becomes formal policy in 2027 and that intelligence officials will quietly refer to in private conversation as the Halcyon Standard. In a small federal facility in Colorado, Brigham Albright will spend the rest of his life writing letters that nobody will answer. The signing key to the covert firmware partition, recovered from his home office in Highland Park, will be physically destroyed in a ceremony witnessed by representatives of the FBI, NSA, CISA, and DOJ National Security Division on a date in 2026 that has not been publicly disclosed. Subscribe to FBI Secret for more cinematic reconstructions of the federal operations that shape our world. FBI raids $8.5 billion cell tower spy network, 47,000 backdoors across America, ========================================================================================================================Operation Steel Halcyon, the inside reconstruction of the largest counterintelligence raid against a U.S. infrastructure contractor in history. Sentinel Networks installed undocumented firmware backdoors in 47,000 5G base stations across military bases, ports, courthouses, and energy facilities, then sold access to 2 foreign intelligence services for $8.5 billion in cryptocurrency. How one Verizon engineer in Long Beach noticed a 4-kilobyte packet leaving every 14 minutes and unraveled a 4-year espionage operation reaching from Dallas boardrooms to Talon safehouses. The 19-month FBI counterintelligence, NSA, CIA, and DOJ National Security Division investigation. The December 9th simultaneous raid. The 28 indictees. The cooperator who saved his wife's life. Steel Halcyon begins now. == intro _end == EA ALT1 aggressive storm / raid. FBI storms 6 facilities at 4:30 a.m. inside the $8.5 billion cell tower espionage raid. ALT2 informative. The 47,000 backdoor cell towers. How FBI counterintelligence cracked Operation Steel Halcyon. ALT3 victim / scale. 47,000 compromised towers. 3 senators tracked 1 dead dissident. The Sentinel Networks case. ALT4 with series tag. FBI raids $8.5 billion. Cell tower spy network. 47,000 backdoors across America. Vertical bar. FBI files == additional _end == pre-dawn raid scene. A row of black FBI Suburbans with headlights extinguished pulled up on the curving brick driveway of a massive Georgian Highland Park estate. Navy windbreaker agents in formation around the front oak door with a hydraulic ram raised, breath visible in cold December air. Background: faint silhouette of a 5G cell tower against a dark blue 4:30 a.m. sky with a single red blinking light. Bottom third overlay, large block text reading 47,000 backdoors with smaller subtext, $8.50 billion. Color palette, deep navy, FBI raid jacket yellow lettering, single red accent on the tower light, tight cinematic depth of field, agents in sharp focus, mansion looming behind, no faces clearly visible. Tent. Cover end.